What is going on, YouTube? So, been a few days, maybe a week or so, longer since I did my last video. But I mentioned in my last few videos that I wanted to do some discussion about conference expansion and, realignment, expansion, whatever. This crazy round of seismic shifts in the college sports landscape all started last month with the rumor of Texas and OU leaving for the SEC from the Big 12. It's anyone's best guess, I think, at this point, what will actually materialize. The one thing we do know is the Big 12 is on pretty thin ice. What happens from there, I don't know. I think the Pac-12 is probably the most likely to expand just because of the current state of the conference. But, the Big 10 and the ACC could always make moves here, too, as, we look to head toward a world of super conferences. But in this particular video, I wanted to talk about who I think are the best options for the ACC. I've talked about the Big 10 because I think their path is the most straightforward. I also think they're in the best shape right now. I think the ACC is probably the third best conference at this point once you remove Texas and OU from the Big 12. And even if not, the ACC probably is still the third best conference. So I'm going to go through a few honorable mentions here and then 5 candidates because I think you've got a short list of about 7 or 8 schools that the ACC could realistically consider without really poaching someone outside of the Big 12 or the independents, and then one school that maybe can slide back in. So let's go and get started here with some of the honorable mentions. And I'm just going to go ahead and start off the bat here. I'm going to say Maryland. I don't really think Maryland should have ever left the ACC. I don't think that it's really a clean fit in the Big 10. Kind of like Rutgers. But honestly, I don't know if Maryland would leave. But if they find it more advantageous, maybe more success back in basketball, I just think that they're a better fit back in the ACC. They were in that conference for a long time. And a lot like West Virginia going to the Big 12, I didn't really understand the move, or Mizzou to the SEC or anything like that. Again, long shot for sure. But I do think that if we're facing a very major round of conference realignment, that could certainly be an option worth considering. Now, the 2 more realistic options at this point, if the ACC does expand, at least among my honorable mentions. First one's Navy. Navy is, I think, an interesting candidate. I could see them going to the Power 5. I think among the service academies, they're the strongest athletic program. Army's found more success in football recently, and in some instances since the turn of the century, Air Force has been stable at times for football, but I don't think that Air Force or Army is really a viable candidate for the ACC for college sports purposes. I think Navy, you got the stability of the head coach with the football program. They're a regular bowl team, one of the stronger football programs. And considering we're taking a football first approach here, I think that's worth mentioning. But, Ken Niumatalolo is one of the longer tenured head coaches of any group of 5 program in the country. So I think you have a viable candidate there. The last one on my list, I think, is the most viable among the honorable mentions and came very close to getting in the top 5. I think you can make an argument for them pretty easily in the top 5 is UCF. I think UCF would be a natural fit in the ACC. I think the broad appeal for the ACC would be there if you have UCF, Miami, and Florida State. I don't know how much Miami and Florida State would be in favor of that, but I think just for the marketability, you can expand into the Orlando TV market and really challenge the SEC to some degree, or at least try for the state of Florida. All you really have for the SEC in Florida are the Gators. And I think if you got Florida State, Miami, and UCF, you pose a challenge there for those recruiting grounds, that TV market, just general college sports superiority. I think that's a really good option for the ACC. So moving to the top 5 here. And, I do want to mention with this first, I think the 5th best candidate for the ACC that you could probably interchange with TCU, but I have Oklahoma State. I think that either Oklahoma State or TCU could really be the most valuable football addition, just at least in terms of immediate impact, success in the win column, that sort of thing. Both have extremely long, lengthy, tenured head coaches, have been Big 12 contenders, pretty consistent top 25 teams, and both have been, at least decent in basketball, good in baseball. TCU is a good academic institution. I think TCU has an argument there, but I think if in a world where the ACC would take on 2 teams, because I think that 16 would be the move for them, maybe 14. I don't know. Keep it somewhere in that ballpark, but you could go with 2 or 4 in that scenario. But anyway, I think Oklahoma State makes a little bit more sense if you're going with a package deal. West Virginia is usually the first school that comes to mind, but if you can't get that package deal of West Virginia, Notre Dame, I think you can look toward Oklahoma State and then maybe TCU after that, except for one other school that I have on the list. Number 4, I've got Cincy. I think Cincinnati among the group of 5 candidates would be the best option for the ACC, just a little bit ahead of UCF. You get to expand into Big Ten territory a little bit, and Cincinnati is one of the most well-rounded athletic programs right now among the group of 5 conferences. If you buy into, I think, Luke Fickell staying at Cincinnati, then I think that the appeal broadens at that point. But you now have Gus Malzahn at UCF, and I mean, he said that might be his final stop, and we'll see kind of how that materializes. But you have 2 really strong football programs from the group of 5 there. Where Cincinnati does separate itself is with the basketball program. It is one of the better traditional basketball programs in the country. You still get a pretty big TV market in Cincinnati. You don't even have anywhere in Ohio right now. So I think that is pretty valuable to the ACC as well. I wouldn't discount Cincinnati and UCF as 2 expansion candidates. I think for the Big 12, the Big 10, or the ACC, those 2 schools could have, a respectable level of viability as candidates. At number 3, I've got my second Big 12 school up on the list, and that's Kansas. I know Kansas to the Big 10 is, if Kansas moves, that's probably what's going to happen. Kansas to the Pac-12, maybe, but I actually think that the second most appealing or realistic option for the ACC or for Kansas just in general would be this fit. Kansas is not a good football program, but the ACC, they've got a lot of schools that historically haven't been great in football, mainly looking at Duke, but that, really excel in basketball. I think the ACC is mostly thought of as a basketball first conference if you really discount Clemson. Not discount, but if you take them out of the picture, if you discount Clemson. But I think that fit there would be really appealing to have, Louisville, Kansas, UNC, Duke, all in the same conference. I mean, and you've got other basketball programs in the ACC that have really come on strong in the past 4 or 5 years. I'm sure I'm going to miss one off the top of my mind, but obviously Virginia is extremely strong, one of the best basketball programs in the country. You got Florida State, who's been very good of late, especially in producing NBA talent. So Kansas, I just think from that perspective, the academic fit, maybe football picks up, maybe that's a new opportunity, really just a change of scenery for them. But mainly it's the fit with basketball that I think would be very broadly appealing for the ACC. Number 2, I've got the most natural fit from the Big 12, and that's just West Virginia. I mean, West Virginia probably should have gone to the ACC in the first place. It makes a lot more sense in the ACC than in the Big 12. I honestly think if the ACC does expand, West Virginia is probably going to be the slam dunk option. I think the top school on my list is definitely the ACC's first call, but West Virginia, if you're bringing in 2 more schools, West Virginia is going to be one of those that you just kind of have to get. The geographic fit's good basketball program, good football program. Across the board, athletics are very respectable at West Virginia. And, you bring some rivalries back. You got West Virginia Pitt, you've got West Virginia, Virginia Tech. It makes a lot of sense. I like that fit, as I think most people do. And then number 1 is very clear, far and away, Notre Dame. Yes, the Notre Dame's going to get calls from everyone. If you're looking to make a big splash like the SEC just did with Texas and OU, which pretty much every power conference would love to make at this point, Notre Dame is pretty much your best bet unless you can poach someone from another power conference outside of the Big 12. I think that the 2 conferences that must be just nonstop dialing Notre Dame right now are probably the ACC and the Big 10. Notre Dame just competed in the ACC, though, last year. They compete in the ACC in every other sport on an annual basis outside of football. They do pretty well. I think if the ACC could get Notre Dame, and then you open up a world of options. At that point, Notre Dame and West Virginia would be a great haul for the ACC. I think put them in the realm of the Big Ten, just in terms of strength of the conference if you combine basketball and football. The Big Ten, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't get Kansas, if the conference just stands pat. I mean, you've got a very strong top of the conference, multiple blue bloods in football, good in basketball too. I mean, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, not so much in basketball, but it's a very strong conference as is. And I think the ACC is a little bit behind right now, just again, in terms of that strength as a whole. If you get Notre Dame, though, that definitely pumps it up a notch. West Virginia makes a lot of sense. Again, a pretty strong athletic program altogether. West Virginia is a stronger athletic program as a whole than some of the schools in the ACC right now, multiple schools in the Big Ten. So that just, again, to me, makes a lot of sense. Even if you don't get West Virginia, there's a lot of appeal to, I think, if you even get a haul like Notre Dame in Cincinnati or Notre Dame in Kansas. Again, don't know how likely Kansas to the ACC is, but I just like the fit. It would be a lot of fun with basketball. But anyway, that's pretty much it. Again, I wanted to get a different perspective on the ACC. ACC conference expansion right now is, I think, one of the less talked about conferences because they have kind of a set list of maybe 8 or 10 candidates, and then you really have to start thinking outside the box. And I think a lot of people think that just if the ACC does expand, it's just, well, we're going to go with Notre Dame and West Virginia. If we don't get Notre Dame, we're going to go with West Virginia and then one other Big 12 or Group of 5. And I think that there's a pretty clear pecking order with that. Whether they want to, I guess that depends on whether they would want to pull in 2 or 4. And again, that's all assuming that they don't stand pat. But this is all pretty much speculation. I mean, I'm sure that there's been contact between the ACC and West Virginia. It'd be hard to believe if there wasn't. But the rest of the schools on this list, maybe I've heard stuff about there being contact between Oklahoma State and the ACC if Notre Dame to the ACC doesn't happen, which I'd say odds are 75% chance Notre Dame just stays independent. But again, they played during the pandemic year in the ACC, made it to the playoff, made it to the ACC championship game. And I mean, when Trevor Lawrence was in the mix, they weren't doing so hot, but when he was out, they won. And, I think there's, again, a lot of viability to Notre Dame to the ACC. West Virginia, again, would probably be the slam dunk candidate there. Anyway, I'll digress on that. That's pretty much it. I do want to come back, talk about the kind of Group of 5 picture as a whole right now, and then any moves to the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is probably going to be a longer video because they have a very large amount of options to expand, and I think they're the most in need of expansion among the power conferences. Anyway, that's pretty much it. See ya.